The Titanic, a tragedy, happened in 1912, finally explained. The Titanic was built in Belfast, Ireland, and was owned by the White Star Line. It took 3 years to build and needed 3 million rivets to join its metal sheets together to form the hull. Believe it or not, 20 horses were needed to pull the ship's main anchor. Fast forward a few years till March 1911, and the ship was finally launched. April 1912, the Titanic is at Southampton, ready for its maiden voyage to New York. Over 1,000 passengers have already boarded the ship. At noon, the Titanic departed for Southampton, and it went to two other stops, one in France and the other in Ireland, before continuing across the week journey to New York. April 14th, 1912, 4 days after the Titanic left Southampton. The Titanic had received 6 iceberg warnings that same day, but the ship kept going to almost its full speed, that of 22 at 11:40 p.m., the lookouts in the crow's nest spotted a huge iceberg rolling out of the darkness. First Officer Murdoch gave the order to the hosing engines. He avoided a head-on collision, but the iceberg scraped the Titanic's side, causing water to gush in to an alarming rate. The Titanic was doomed, and it started to sink at an alarming rate. Titanic's message was picked up by a ship named the Carpathia and said they would be there in 4 hours. But the Titanic had only two. So the ship's crew members started firing flares to try and get closer ships' attention of the disaster which was happening right now. The first few boats were launched around this time. The first boat was launched 1 hour after the Titanic hit the iceberg. And the reason the first few boats weren't full were because passengers thought the ship was unsinkable and didn't believe that such a mighty vessel would sink. The Titanic has sunk more, and now the bow is almost underwater. People are starting to realize that the Titanic is finally starting to sink. The bow disappeared completely under the Atlantic. And now people started to panic because they realized that there weren't enough boats for everyone on board. More boats are being launched, and people are starting to jump into other boats to try and save their lives. Captain Smith orders boats who were left half full to come back and pick up passengers from the ship. But a lot of the boats refused because they thought that their boat would sink with the suction the ship was creating. Another hour passed, and the Titanic's bridge is completely underwater. The funnels couldn't resist the pressure, so they started to implode, which caused the forward funnel to crash on some people. Water was pulling on the deck, and people were trying to swim either on the ship or on the boats that were left, while other people decided that staying on the ship was probably the best thing to do. Now people are starting to get away from the water as far as they can, since they know that the water is extremely cold, -2 degrees Celsius or 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 1,000 people are still on the ship. Finally, the Titanic's lights go out, and everyone is left in complete darkness. The ship's hull wasn't built to withstand that much stress and started to snap. Before long, the Titanic had split in two, with the stern completely crushing people in the water and the bow sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic. The stern raised vertically with people clinging on to dear life. The bow had completely sunken down at this point. The stern stayed about 2 minutes on top of the water while all the air inside the hull escaped before slowly started to sink into the freezing water as well. It took both halves of the Titanic, the bow and the stern, about 5 to 10 minutes for them to sink the 4-kilometer drop to the bottom of the Atlantic. And that's where the Titanic stayed for 73 years before being finally discovered by Dr. Robert Ballard. This is the Titanic today. As you can see, Titanic is completely unrecognizable and scientists think that it will completely be gone by 30 years. Let us respect the people who tragically lost their lives during this disaster. Over 1,500 people lost their lives, and 706 were saved by the Carpathia that same morning. Thank you for listening. I hope this video helped you understand more about the Titanic disaster.